And welcome back to the Luke Deckard Show. I'm your host, Luke Deckard. Luke Deckard? Luke Deckard. Oh, Frank's already here. Hey, buddy. Move that bus. I don't know if I get the reference. This is from something we've talked about, or something that was on Twitter, or something somewhere, but it's completely gone over my head. I'm going to blame Dad Brain on that because remind me, buddy. So I'm excited to have all of you listeners here for the next hour as I ramble about a bunch of shapoopy. I got all sorts of things to say about all sorts of things, and should be fun. Should be fun. Philippe is in the chat. He says, "Nice hat, thanks, brah. Thanks, brah. Dad Brain Podcast TM. That's what I should rebrand this. Let me just say up front, like and subscribe. Come on. What are you trying to be, a secret agent? Says Phil. No. Don't they normally wear like ball caps, like plain ball caps? Phil, he's not at home. He's just stopping by to say hello to the good listeners of the Luke Deckard Show. Hello from Phil, from Croatia, Indiana. So yeah, how's your week been, folks? How's your week been? Mine has been pretty good. Things are happening in my life that are happening. Yeah, so what's been going on? So this last week, before I get into the pop culture stuff that I want to complain about. One of the things I did this last week was I finished writing a short story. I really like it. I just gotta say, I really like it. It's one of my favorite short stories that I've written. I am going to submit it to a thing, and fingers crossed it gets in. I never sort of submit to a thing with with all these high hopes that you're gonna get it, but this is I would like it because I think it's a really good story. I think this new detective that I've created is very fun and gritty and engaging, and the story is a wonderful tragedy. It's a wonderful tragedy. That was something I did this week. That was pretty cool, and I'm in the middle of preparing for my Viva, which for those of you who don't know, I'm finishing a PhD in crime fiction, and the Viva is the end of the process where you defend your work to your not your supervisors, but to some external and internal examiners. That was meant to happen next week, but classic academia, someone effed up and didn't put it in their diary. So now that's been postponed to the beginning of November at some point, which is fine because it gives me a couple of days. Not a couple of days. Gives me another month of revising. So that's what's going on in my life at the moment. It doesn't sound like a lot, but I assure you it is. Frank says Luke not getting the reference is great. It rings a bell. There's something there. There's something there, and I just can't remember. My brain doesn't hold information very well like that. It's really frustrating. Like Frank and Phil and like these guys, like they can just sit there and rattle off film quotes and things like that, where I'm like, I can remember them in a specific moment, but I can remember like the general gist of like a story or things like that. But like, yeah, no, I struggle to kind of retain certain things. Like for example, like Frank is really good at remembering like red letter media quotes, and I wish I was as good as Frank with that, because man, I would love to be crushing the red letter media quotes. The one that I'm drilling into my brain is the only thing he should be hosting is a Parasite, which is Mike Stacklasa said that about Jimmy Fallon, which I totally agree with. But yeah, so okay, let's talk about some stuff. I'm going to share my screen. So there's a bunch of things that have happened in the last week or so that I thought was worthy of a little bit of a discussion. One of the big things being Martin Scorsese's recent comments about comic book movies being a kind of a threat to culture and to cinema. Which is just funny that he's made those comments right after Chris Evans was like, "Oh, when I signed up for Captain America, I was really worried that I just, I didn't want to be making like crappy movies." And it's like, well, I hate to break it to you, Chris, but you did. But I'll go into that in more detail because it's not that I hate all Captain America movies, or all the MCU movies, but we will get there in due course. And I also want to talk about the Doctor Who trailer for the 60th anniversary because boy, do I have thoughts on that. Boy, do I have thoughts. Nadia's here. What's up, Nadia? What's up from the other side of the pond? Not even just the other side of the pond, like twice that. Like you, like I think about that in terms of like where I live in Indiana. Like you, it's like 4,000 miles from here to Indiana. And then you're like another 4,000 miles. America's so huge. I don't think people get it when they're like, "Oh, I knew someone from America. Do you know Johnny McSugarballs?" And it's like, No. "Oh, really? But he lives in the same state as you." It's like, do you realize how big a state is? A state is like the same size as the entirety of Great Britain. But yeah, so this is what I want to start talking about. Let me do the share screen. This is what I want. Right. So first thing on the agenda tonight is this article that the Atlantic released. This is nuts. This is a really fecking frustrating story. So the general gist is some dipshit basically plundered a bunch of books from the internet and was creating a repository of some kind for it. A result of that then led to a bunch of tech companies like Meta, who own Facebook and other places, using this huge database of books to train their generative AI systems. So you can see in the headlines it says 183,000 books are fueling the biggest fight in publishing and tech. What the Atlantic have done though is they've created a search engine, so you can search to see if if you're an author, you can search to see if your books are on there. And guess what? Should have hit everything because now it's all echoey. But guess what? Searched my name, and lo and behold, my works are on there. So my works have helped contribute to Meta and other jackass organizations train their mother flippin' AI systems, which is awful. This is so illegal. So illegal, because not only did the guy who created this thing called Books3, which was the big repository, just basically just steal, pirate, everybody's books, but for these mega corporations to then just like come in and then take that and train their fucking systems, and then not at any point think that this is super massively unethical, and that maybe the writers of these works that we're mining for our own benefit are should be compensated in somehow. Nope, 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 nope. They just fucking took everything, like the greedy assholes that they are. Like, I know YouTube's algorithms are already fucking pissed off because it's like I'm dropping the F-bomb so many times in the first 10 minutes, but this one's fired me up. This one, I'm annoyed by this. If look, the writers in Hollywood have been striking for 60 days, 40 days, because making a living as a writer is really hard. Really, really effing hard. Like, if it's hard for them, imagine just some guy like me, like churning out some books every once in a while, you make almost nothing. And it's really difficult. So then when you find these megacorps have taken your stuff and they're using it to train their systems, it's like, ridiculous. But there are organizations like the Authors Guild and the Writers Guild of Great Britain are responding to this, and who knows what will happen. I do think I believe there is some sort of lawsuit in the process happening. But whether who's going to really benefit from this lawsuit, I don't know. I feel like this is like a suing Pirate Bay sort of situation where the only people that are going to benefit is probably the government. I can't imagine. Actual money's coming back towards coming back to the writers, given how many books that were stolen. Of that, I would love to know how many are. It'd be interesting to see how many are outside of copyright, therefore free to use. And that's the other thing to think about. It's like, there are plenty of works that are copyright free, that if their copyright is expired and you can do what you want with them, and that's fine. But it's like, those who are still, their works are still bound by copyright. Come on, treat them with some respect. Pay them what they're effing due. You goddamn sons of bitches. But yeah, Nadia, the GIF, yes, the GIF is mesmerizing. It is. I've been sort of just staring at it myself. But yeah, so this is a nutty story, and it's really frustrating. I wish more could be done. This is why. I mean, I've had many, about two or three shows where I've talked about AI, and this is just why I don't like it, because it just this emphasizes how AI is just it is strictly a tool, and it is not a replica for it cannot replicate genuine writing. All it does is imitate other people's work. And the thing is, like, if it's learning to put a story together or write something through imitating other people's work, well, then that essentially who's the people that the system is using to build its algorithm, like, we should be getting compensated for that, because it's taking our work and regurgitating it and using bits of it to spit some shit out. So yeah, so that's just it's really frustrating, and I would love to see this. I'm fascinated to see what happens with this story. I would love to see all this stuff taken down. I would love to see these corporations be forced to compensate for basically this mass piracy. It is also quite baffling that when you think about these megacorps, they're so they have all their ethical clauses and stuff like that, and their employees have to sign ethical bits and stuff like that in their contracts, but then they just go off and do something like this, and you're like, fuck you. It's very, very, very frustrating for us creatives. It's very, very, very frustrating. So yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think about this? Do you not care? I care. I think it's freaking annoying. And it's interesting. This this is also this story has kind of been around since the summer, but this big dump of information in a search engine is only a couple of days old. Nadia, language, Luke. I know. It's so frustrating though. It's so frustrating. I got to get it all out. But it's fine. It's fine. It shouldn't. The language shouldn't scare away the listeners and the subscribers, right? Just stop, grow up. It's fine. So yeah, that's kind of all I really want to say about that. Before I get into Scorsese stuff, because I want to get into that next, I did have a laugh when I was looking on Twitter sometime this week, and found out that, lo and behold, there is an Office reboot in development, and Greg Daniels will return as a showrunner, apparently. And it's just, to me, this was such a moment of like deflation. It's like, my God, like, could you imagine like a few years? When did The Office end? Like, it ended like 2009 maybe, something like that. I don't know. But it's like The Office isn't that old. And if you think about like reruns, like I grew up watching Friends, and then Friends ended 20 years ago, and I've spent the last 20 years watching reruns of Friends, you know? It's like people have been watching reruns of The Office since it began. Like it's still a cultural touchstone. It's things that people quote it, people remember it, people use gifs from it all the time because it's that embedded. It was kind of my. I was quite young when Friends came out. I was literally like 2 or 3 when Friends first came out. So by the time it ended, I was 10ish or something like that. So it was kind of there in the background. But like for me, watching something and being aware of what I'm watching, something like The Office is kind of my generation's Friends. So it's so embedded that it doesn't need a reboot. And it's like we've just went through this 140 some odd 160 days or whatever of a writer's strike, and this is one of the first things that comes out is a dumb reboot of The Office. Like, come on. Naughty in the chat says, unpopular opinion. I don't like The Office. I never understood the charm of it. I genuinely loved it. I really did. I watched the Office. The Office US was out, I think, a season or two, and then I kind of watched the UK Office, which the UK Office is good but not great. It's a much shorter show. I think only has 3 seasons in I think like a Christmas special that sort of concludes everything. But something about The Office just really worked for me. I think I really loved Steve Carell. I liked Dwight. I liked Jim. I liked Pam. I liked the kind of silliness of it. I don't know. It always worked for me. But I loved it. But I'm just thinking, do we need a reboot of it? And here's the other thing is, what do we mean by reboot? Reboot seems to be this word that just sort of gets thrown around, and I don't know if people really understand what it means, because one of my friends cheekily tweeted me, and he's like, "Well, the U.S. Office is already a reboot," and I was like, "Well, no, because a reboot is a remake. It's like Andrew Garfield taking over as Spider-Man. That is a reboot. We've gone back to the beginning, same character, retelling the same story, just slightly differently. Like that's what a reboot is. But so it's like, what is this literally going to be? Michael, Jim, Dwight, Pam, played by new people in a similar environment? Like, are we just in a more modern context? Like, really? Or is this going to be a kind of a fresh-ish remake, a la, like, I don't know, say like Battlestar Galactica, where it's like we're gonna just redo the whole thing and change things up. But reboot is kind of become this ambiguous term of what does it really mean to reboot something. Reboot to me is like we're gonna take the same thing, the same group of characters, and just start over. But if you're doing a remake, I'm like, okay, well the remake is the what's his face's new Batman movie, Twilight Boy. Frank in the chat says nobody asked for a reboot. It's only coming back because it's a popular IP. Next question. Well, I mean, I know, I get that, and this is what's partly what's frustrating to me. It's like, well, we don't. It doesn't need a reboot. The IP is popular itself. It's not going to become more popular with a new show about a new Office. It's just to me it just seems totally redundant, and it seems lame after this writer's strike where it's like we've not had anything. Everything has been paused. Everything has been delayed, and writers want to get out there and create new things. And the first thing is Office Reboot. It's like, oh jeez. Oh jeez. Which I guess sort of brings into the next topic of is culture in crisis? It's an interesting question. I think I should make that smaller so you can So is culture in crisis is sort of building off of Martin Scorsese's comments in a recent interview with GQ. Martin Scorsese has been in the past many times about his he he doesn't like comic book movies. They're basically fair rides for him. They're cheap thrills essentially. And I gotta be honest, I kind of don't disagree with him on a whole. There was a time when I think that comic book movies had more to say, more to do, but and even early MCU, I think fell into that. I think if you look at the original X-Men films, the original Spider-Man films, maybe not so much like Daredevil or Elektra, or Fantastic Four. Those are definitely very early misfires. But you go back to Batman or Superman, and a few others scattered throughout, and obviously some various TV shows and things like that. Blade, which I recently spoke about with Nadia and her husband Chris, and yep. Frank mentions Hulk 2003. Hulk 2003 is a good movie. It's a good movie. So I think yeah, I think there was a time when comic book movies, when they were smaller, not as popular, and whatnot, were able to be a little bit more daring, be a little bit more interesting. There wasn't this chokehold of shared universe bullshit that has just come in and exhausted me, particularly. Nadia says Spawn. Spawn. We can do a retrospective of Spawn one day. So yeah, so in this recent interview, Martin Scorsese was he was chatting about some stuff. Let me jump to the quote so I can find it. There we go. So the interviewer, is asking him, basically asked him some questions about comic book movies and theaters and things like that. And what does he say here? Blah, 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 blah. Yes, so he sees, basically Martin says that he sees the trouble in the glut of franchise and comic book entertainment that currently makes up much of what you see in a theater. He's quoted as saying, "The danger there is what it's going to do to our culture, because there are going to be generations now that think movies are only those. That's what movies are." And it's sad, but I think it's true. I really do. I can't imagine how boring it must be. I don't want to sound like such an old man now, but I can't imagine how boring it must be to be a teenager now growing up with the cinematic landscape that we have. I remember growing up, there was all sorts of nutty things out there. Yes, you had your comic book movies like Spawn and what was the one that Billy Zane did? Oh crap, he's wearing that purple suit. Anyway, that one. You had your Batmans and your Superman TV shows and Smallville, that I need to mention every episode. You had that kind of stuff, but then you also just had other kinds of movies, things that were big. I mean, Lord of the Rings was basically my generation. Star Wars, the Phantom. Not even yes, the Phantom. That's it, the Phantom. We don't really have a Lord of the Rings anymore. There hasn't been a Lord of the Rings since then, and all we've really had, since has been by the time the first decade of the 2010s was interesting and fun, because there were other kinds of movies. Yes, there were comic movies like The Watchmen and stuff like that, but you had things like Pirates of the Caribbean that was fun. I don't know, Indiana Jones, which wasn't too good. The Shadow with Baldwin. I don't know about that. Don't tell Luke, let him swim. I wasn't gonna look it up. Anything I forget is going to be down to dad brain. But yeah, there was more variety, I feel, of movies. Even like if you think about like Iron Giant came out, that was a fun one. Now you just get Pixar just regurgitates the same boring ideas now, or like the kind of the R-rated teen comedies, things like 40-Year-Old Virgin or Super Bad, things like that. Like, man, we don't get that kind of we don't get that kind of fun stuff anymore. It's always oh, there's a Lord of the Rings show coming out. Oh, there's a I don't know. As much as I like House of the Dragon, it's like, okay, well, Game of Thrones, we got House of the Dragon, which is Game of Thrones sequel, which it's fine, it's good and all, but it's like it's still just memorable IP. And it's just after a while it just gets boring. It's Star Trek has come back, and what does Star Trek do? Oh, well, we're gonna take you back to the time of Kirk and Spock. And it's like, well, maybe don't do that, because what made Star Trek so great in the '90s was that it just kept going. It moved forward. It didn't rely on Kirk and Spock to hold the franchise down. Frank's in the chat says Iron Giant. I don't give a shit that Iron Giant flopped. Iron Giant was great, and people know it's great, and it's a hit. So it might have flopped in the cinema, but it is a great movie, and like it was playing at the Dollar Cinema all the time when I was a youngin. But yeah. So it's again we're just getting all this regurgitation of stuff. And now all you have is comic book stuff taking over. You have Marvel MCU, which just dominates everything. DC is then right behind it, and it's like it's not a cult classic. Iron Giant, come on, man. Yeah, Marvel has really just choked everything out of cinema now, because it just wants to. It's made itself so dominant, but also so redundant at the same time. Because it's like, I don't want to watch every single stupid show to then understand what's happening in all these films. Like I think earlier this year, maybe last year, we watched the last two Avengers movies, and my wife was totally lost. Totally. I mean, she's seen them, and she's seen some of the Marvel shows, and she's seen many of the Marvel movies, but she was like, wait, what's this? Why? And it's because by this sort of dominating, interconnected universe that you have to do all this fucking homework for just to understand what's going on. It's like, nah, I'm not gonna do it. And the other problem is with the Marvel style, the Marvel style is dumb. Compare, if I could at some point do this if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. But like, if you were to compare like the quality of storytelling, characterization, drama of like X-Men 2 or Spider-Man 2 or The Watchmen, and compare that, or you could add 80 Batman Returns and the original Superman movie. If you were to compare that stuff, the quality of those to MCU, kind of really everything post Iron Man 1, and Hulk, essentially once Disney took over, what you'll find is there's a few blips of positive stuff. Iron Man 3, Avengers 1, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and then everything else just falls into this like mesh of just like processed fast food filmmaking that, to me, what I don't understand culturally is why we've gone, why people become so obsessed with it. I mean, I guess it kind of explains itself, really. If you look thinking of the fast food analogy, it's cheap and easy, and you don't have to think. And this is why I'm totally, I really do understand or feel I am with Scorsese on this, and that is culturally there is a problem. People are dumb. When Black Panther came out, everyone was acting like that was the first movie to have a black superhero, and it's like, you fucking dumb. It's not. There are movies that happened before 2010, guys. Like, go and look at them. But we just have this like stupid spoon-fed culture now that I don't think these films actually are. They don't help that problem. They don't. take inspiration from the past and then inspire younger audience to go and look at those past products. They just sort of, you know, ch- cheaply mimic or imitate other people's styles or works a little bit. But also just the general blandness of the MCU now. Like, people have been complaining about is simple fact of like just the color grading, man. Like, they're so, like, if you again look at like something like the Watchmen and then look at something like Captain America or the Avengers, like there's so much color and grit and detail to something like the Watchmen, and then MCU is just like just the most basic bland color scheme possible. Everything just looks like a cheap TV show. And it's something that's always bothered me. Like, it's bothered me for a long time, even back when I was still pro MCU. But it's like, you're pushing out bottom level stuff, and you're pretending as if it's high level cinema, and it's not high storytelling. It's not really entertaining for me, because I can get better comic book movies from the past. If I went to go watch one, I'd rather do that. Or if I want to watch a bad one, I'll go watch something like Ghost Rider. That's stupid and silly and fun, and have a good time watching that. Then watch something like, I mean, we tried to watch Ant-Man a few months ago on Disney Plus, and man, that film was dog shit. Absolute dog shit. Like, there is no quality coming from that movie whatsoever. So anyone watching that film, like, I would, if the MCU is still chugging along when my kid is older, like, no way, I'm not letting her watch the MCU, because it's dumb. It's dumb storytelling. It's not interesting. So yeah, what's Frank saying in the chat? Let's go to the chat. Let's cool down for a minute. Frank says superhero movies were once event films. Then they became the norm and pushed out regular movies. That is exactly what happened. Smaller and mid budget movies got pushed out, and turned movies to rides. Yeah, I agree, and it's a shame. It's because I'm all for. Here's the thing. I'm all for fun, big action movies. Not everything needs to be like this deep philosophical thing. Um, yes, none of these be this deep philosophical thing. Like, I'm all for your John Wicks or your Jason Bournes, your James Bond. Like, I'm all for things that are just a fun thrill. They don't need to be making astute commentary on society or social issues. But the thing is, comic book movies, and this is one of the reasons why I think I've always loved Bryan Singer's first two X-Men movies, and some of the latter ones, is that they were really great balance of the fun superhero genre, but also trying to be smart about what their allegory is trying to be. And I think this is another reason why I've always liked X-Men comic books and even Spider-Man comics, is because, yes, it was a media for essentially geared for kids. But if you go back and you read older comics, they don't talk down to kids. Yes, there's fun, there's hijinks, there's some silly dialogue, and there's some silly plots, but there's also really quite insanely adult material in what is essentially a children's comic. I mean, I recently reread the collection of like the Venom saga, and there's all sorts of stuff through that's hella adult. That I'm like, I could just imagine just like 12-year-old boy reading this and just getting a kick out of what he's seeing and reading, and then probably when they're older, things will start to click. Or you take something like Toy Story. Toy Story 1 to 3 are brilliant. Nothing exists beyond Toy Story 3, by the way. But yeah, you think about like the Toy Story franchise. Like, I remember as a kid, I never understood why Mr. Potato Head grabbed his lips and stuck it to his butt. I never got it. I thought it was funny, but I didn't get it. And then eventually, when I got older, I was like, oh, he's calling him a kiss ass. Oh, I get it now. That's funny. So it's the MCU and a lot of these comic book movies, including the DC movies, they don't they really do right for stupid. in my opinion. They have started to do that, and it's now become the norm. You look at shows like Loki, you look at shows like She-Hulk. They're unwatchable. They're absolutely unwatchable. They are the dumbest of the dumb that you could possibly get. Um, so I totally get why Scorsese's like, no, like this is ridiculous and we need to push back. And I absolutely agree. And that's why, though I haven't seen it yet, I am really glad that films like Oppenheimer are one of the biggest movies this summer. Beating out franchises that I love, like Mission Impossible, which poor Mission Impossible, but Indiana Jones and the stupid Flash. Seeing something original, a 3-hour movie that is partly in black and white about this guy who invented the atomic bomb. Like, that being one of the biggest movies of the summer is a shock and kind of a miracle. And so yeah, in Scorsese's comments, he's like, you need to go and support these people, like Nolan and things like that, because that's really what needs to happen. And he was encouraging people to get out there, go reinvent, and don't complain about it. It's like I agree. His comment here, just to go reinvent, and it's like, yeah, man, do it. I don't understand why creatives aren't trying to like create new things and not and reinvent stuff. Like there's so many ways you can take things, mesh things together, and reinvent the Western, reinvent the police procedural, reinvent something, do it in a way that's fun and new and has a fun flair to it, not the same old bullshit. And I really, looking back now, like in terms of the Marvel stuff, I think the last great piece of comic book filmmaking is probably Daredevil. Those 3 seasons of Daredevil. Nothing, Jessica Jones was all right. Luke Cage was all right. The one with the Dragon Boy was stupid. But I think Daredevil was probably the last, and it's hilarious that Marvel pushed. So Marvel Studios like, no, that's TV, that's not connected to our movies. Stay away. At the time, it annoyed the hell out of me. But now I'm like, oh, thank God. Because you have 3 seasons of essentially really great television, and 3 seasons of a great Daredevil show. And anything that comes after now is not going to be connected. It's going to be Disney-fied and cheap and boring. So yeah, I'm all for saying, look, this summer for me was like kind of the line in the sand of like, I'm bored and done with these bland, vanilla, safe comic book movies and franchises. Like it's time to end. It's time for the Jedi to end. Which is what's also funny, because Chris Evans, who plays Captain America, was in the news earlier this week-ish. Let me take a drink of water. Chris Evans was in the news this week, and the line that cracked me up was, he was saying, he was talking about when he was signing up to be Captain America, and he was signing his life away and all that kind of stuff, and he's like, oh, he was worried that he's going to be making crappy movies. He's like, I don't want to be making shitty movies and be contractually obliged or obligated to make garbage. And I'm just kind of like, man, like, are you, like, let's be real, man. Like, Captain America Civil War, or sorry, not Civil War, Winter Soldier is the anomaly. It's the only one that is remotely borderlines great for me. In terms of a comic book movie that the MCU has done, but it still has its moments where it dips. I think the Scarlett Johansson magical face hologram was stupid. His, Steve Rogers' relationship with Sharon Carter was laughably boring. No chemistry whatsoever. So there were definitely some weak bits to that movie. It's also a little bit too long. I think I remember it feeling like it dragged a little bit when it didn't need to. Um, but that one, though, for its flaws, it's still for me. It's like if I were to ever watch a Captain America movie, it would be that one. I wished Captain America 1 was great, but it's not. It's really not. The first hour is about the most interesting thing the film has to offer, but the second Steve Rogers becomes Captain America, boring. The film just dips, and it dips because it spends a whole hour setting up Steve Rogers, setting up his his philosophy, his who he is as a person, his goodness and all that kind of stuff, and why he's the best candidate for the super soldier program. But then once he's Captain America, then all of a sudden they introduce his team, which looked on paper like they were going to be interesting. I was, oh, these look like fun characters that we're going to get to know. We don't get to know any of them. I can't remember their names now. Phil is back. Welcome, Phil. Welcome, Phil. Phil, I'm talking about Captain America. I'm talking about how Captain America 1 isn't very good. The Red Skull. The Red Skull played by Hugo Weaving. Great actor. Like, what a great actor. What a fucking useless waste of a great actor as well. Like, he was such a boring villain. He didn't offer there wasn't anything that he didn't offer anything to the story that was impactful, in my opinion. I mean, an example of a great comic book villain: Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, Doctor Octopus in Spider-Man 2, Ian McKellen's Magneto. Like, you remember these guys, you remember their quotes, you remember what they do, what they're all about. What do you remember about Red Skull other than he just wants the Tesseract? That's it. Why does he want it? He just wants it. What's his big plan? He just wants a Tesseract. It's all a bit boring and superficial. And once that first half of the movie is over, there's montage of characters doing things, and I think that is one of the laziest forms of storytelling is using montage to emphasize your character development. I mean, even the whole way that like Captain America became like Captain America, like as in like he was just like a propaganda tool, which was interesting. But then he goes on a thing and saves a bunch of men and saves Bucky and all that kind of stuff. And because he does that, he's now an actual captain? It's just like, it's things like that. It's like, okay, this writing doesn't really make sense. Just because he went and did that thing doesn't, so it's like, look, Chris, I'm sorry. You might not have been making garbage movies with these 3 Captain America movies, but they are kind of shitty. And Captain America Civil War is by far one of the most unwatchable movies of the entire MCU. I saw that in the cinema. I remember walking out. I saw it in London at the Odeon Cinema on Tottenham Court Road. I walked out and I was like, that wasn't very good. I think I'm done with Marvel movies. That was the first time I remember just thinking, you know what? I am not enjoying these anymore. They are so samey and so stupid. And, that was one of 2 superhero movies that summer that the big plot twist relied on a you hurt my mommy, or you mentioned my mommy's name trope. That I was just like, I can't believe Captain America and Batman v Superman both did this at the same time. Like, what a weird coincidence. What a weird coincidence. But yeah, so there we are. I'm with Martin Scorsese, and I'm sorry, Chris Evans, if you ever see this. I think you're cool, but these movies aren't that good. Like, they've oversaturated the market. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about tonight is a little bit of Doctor Who. So the 60th anniversary is coming up in November. And I don't know how many of my listeners know my history with Doctor Who. I knew about it growing up as a kid. It was always kind of in the background. I remember getting toy magazines that just had loads of Doctor Who toys in them and never really understood them, knew what it was because it wasn't on TV that I was aware of when I was a kid. But I remember thinking Daleks look cool, Cybermen look cool, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I moved to the UK 2008. People were talking about it because David Tennant was about to leave the show and all that kind of stuff. And then I remember that sort of happening and being sort of aware. And then the thing that really got me into it was the first episode I properly sat down and watched was the premiere of Matt Smith's Doctor. Watched that, thought, oh, this was really great. This is cool. Let's people then kind of looked into what the show was about on a wider scale and then understood the regeneration from the 60s all the way to now it's the same character, blah 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 blah. And then I just went back and just watched as much of it as I could watch, and fell in love with the show. I thought Stephen Moffat was a really good showrunner for the most part of his tenure running Doctor Who from what was it 2010 to I don't know 17 or something like that. I don't know. It's a good long time. Maybe 18, maybe 19. So yeah, so I liked what he was doing. I liked what Moffat was doing with the show, and it had me hooked, and I was interested. I was watching it every week, and there were definitely moments in his run that I didn't like, that I thought were kind of typical Moffat doing Moffat things that were annoying. And I was obviously watching Doctor Who at the same time watching Sherlock and seeing these similarities in his writing style and the similar jokes that he likes to do. And if you watch any of his older shows or even his newer stuff, you can kind of see the Moffat tropes that kind of get a little tiring after a while. But I say that in a respectful way, because I actually think he's a great ideas guy. He is a very good writer, and he has written some of the best Doctor Who episodes of all time. As in, across the 60 years, people will remember certain things that Stephen Moffat has written, because he when he needs to be, he is an excellent writer. So then, he left the show. Peter Capaldi left the show, and they were reviving it. They gave the show to Chris Chibnall, who went on and who'd written, I can't remember what episodes he wrote, 42, I think it was. He basically wrote some of the worst episodes in the Russell T Davies era and in Stephen Moffat's run. His stories, his episodes, I just remember thinking, oh God, you've got, like, I can't believe you've given the show to this guy. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. And then they brought in Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe they gave the Doctor to this girl, because she is not a good actor. She is a charisma, like, void. I remember she was in that show Broadchurch with David Tennant, and well before she was even a thought as being the Doctor, I remember watching that show and being like, oh God, she is really annoying. She is not a good actor. She's really boring, and I'm not interested. And then when they announced her, I thought, okay, oh God, we will see. We have a guy whose track record with Doctor Who is not good, and then you have an actor who I just found to be a charismatic void. And lo and behold, the first episode aired with Jodie Whittaker, and it was dog shit. Obviously there are people out there on the internet pretending like it was good, and there are some people out there who do genuinely like her run and Chibnall's writing, and I guess more power to you, whatever. But if you are in any way sort of, intelligent, then you're going to realize that actually what they were producing was some of the most bland, boring, safe, uninteresting stuff the Doctor Who's ever done. Someone earlier on Twitter today, which I totally agree with, I can't remember who said it, made the comment that that era, the Chibnall era, pretended to be super progressive, but actually in hindsight, it really wasn't. It was, Doctor Who was way more progressive in the Russell T Davies and Stephen Moffat era than it ever was with Jodie Whittaker. The Whittaker era was so safe, because it's like, one of the things that they could have done is there was the character Yaz who was in love with the Doctor, and the Doctor, they always, there's the trope that's been there ever since the Russell T Davies era where the companion always has to fall in love with the Doctor. It's like, fucking stop it. We don't need that shit anymore. Just move on. He's a billion years old. He doesn't need to be hooking up with some 30-year-old human. But it's like one of those things like, okay, well, David Tennant fell in love with Rose, and there was a brief sort of will they won't they romance with Martha, and obviously they didn't do that with Donna. But then Matt Smith's Doctor, there was so much sexual tension between him and his second companion, Clara. And and then Clara obviously fell in love with him, and when Peter Capaldi took over, that was the big kind of drama of, she was like, she was upset because her handsome doctor was gone, and now she's stuck with this old Scottish man, which I loved. And so, Jodie Whittaker's era, yeah, there's a character of Yaz, lady character, who's falls in love with the Doctor. Do they ever go there? No. But Russell T Davies, Moffat's era definitely had lesbian characters who definitely went there, and other pansexual characters, like those era, Russell T Davies and Moffat's era, like they went there with stuff. Where the Chibnall era just was, it dick teased. It didn't actually go anywhere. It wanted to kind of tease the audience and then would never commit. So I totally agree with that comment I saw earlier on Twitter. And the thing is, with the 60th anniversary, when they announced, the things that shocked me were the announcement that David Tennant was coming back and that Catherine Tate was coming back. And I just sort of thought, why are we doing this? Why? I for like a second I thought why, and then I realized why. And this is the BBC are doing their best to course correct as drastically as possible. Yes, as Phil says in the chat, damage control. The reality is, Doctor Who under Chibnall didn't do well. Like, I remember the Moffat era. That was the first big era that I lived through. I remember going in to almost any store, whether it was something like Forbidden Planet or just a grocery store or whatever. You would find and see Doctor Who stuff everywhere, merchandise everywhere. You had the Doctor Who Experience. First, that was in London for a while. Then it was in Cardiff for a while. That eventually shut down, unfortunately. So there was just always Doctor Who stuff happening in around. The Whittaker era, I would go to these same places. I would go to Forbidden Planet, and areas that used to be just whole walls full of Doctor Who have now been condensed to like a small half a shelf, and that's kind of your big sign when you don't have, if your merchandise, you don't get the merchandise, that's your sign that things aren't going well, because that means people aren't watching, kids aren't watching, and they're not wanting to come buy the figures, or people aren't watching, and people like me who like to buy and collect stuff like that aren't interested. Because if you ever come to my house, which I doubt most of you will, but I have a huge display of all my Doctor figures, with some of their companions and some of their monsters that span from the original Doctor all the way through to Peter Capaldi's run. And that's why I stopped, because nothing else matters to me. I just don't care. I'm not interested. Phil, stay out of my house, Luke Deckard. Yes. So yeah, this bringing Tennant back is definitely a form of damage control, and it's interesting because I reviewed the final episode of Jodie Whittaker when it happened, and it struck me as strange that even the way they did the regeneration this time was out of character. It was almost just like a complete sort of like shedding of all skin, And because normally what happens is the Doctor regenerates, and he or she is wearing the same clothes as their previous incarnation, and they, over the course of their first episode, have to find their new personality, and then they come out wearing whatever their new outfit is going to be, and so on and so forth. So it was interesting that this regeneration, when Jodie regenerated, it was this sort of fizzle thing where her whole body just sort of fizzled and changed into David Tennant, but he doesn't wear the same clothes. Like her clothes changed as well. And it's just sort of like, we're going into the 60th anniversary with just new, that old skin is totally gone. We're just going to, are we pretending like it didn't happen? Is this, the way I'm sort of seeing Doctor Who at the moment is, as I'm kind of seeing it as a bit of a soft reboot. I should change this not to that. Let's change this to that. So I get Doctor Who on the screen. I feel like it's a soft reboot, because not only are we going back to 10, we're going back to Catherine Tate's Donna Noble. The last time we saw these two characters together was season 4, the specials of series 4. And they were great, but the way that series ended, to kind of write Donna out of the story, was the Doctor had to erase her mind of all of their adventures, and if he ever met her again or saw her again, she would die, right? And so there's always been this thing, oh, we'd love to see these two come back, how would they do it, yada, yada, yada. But the thing that's interesting to me is, like, well, by going back to Tennant, who was by far the most popular Doctor of them all, his reign, as his time as Doctor Who sort of cemented not only him obviously as one of the most popular Doctors, but it kind of shot Doctor Who up in popularity in the UK, so that by the time Stephen Moffat took over with Matt Smith, the show just skyrocketed globally in a way that it hadn't been able to do really ever. And what it feels like to me, this just feels like we're going back to, look, forget Jodie Whittaker, forget Chris Chibnall. We're going back to the thing that people love the most. We're going back to the thing that springboarded Doctor Who into mass popularity. David Tennant and Catherine Tate. Not only that, but Russell T Davies is coming back and show running Doctor Who. Something he literally said he wasn't going to do. Even for an anniversary special, he was done. But lo and behold, he is back. And the thing is, again, the way this feels to me is, not only do I feel that bringing back these two guys, Tennant and Catherine Tate, it feels like Doctor Who is in crisis mode. It is a desperate attempt from the BBC to say, holy shit, we need to fix this problem, and what's the best thing we can do? Well, Matt Smith was popular-ish, Peter Capaldi was popular-ish, but those series had problems because of X, Y, and Z towards the end. What do people love the most? People love David Tennant. They love him. They wanted, he was in the 50th anniversary special. We need to bring someone back for the 60th. And this is the other thing that's interesting to me, is as of yet, I haven't seen or heard of any of the other Doctors, Peter Capaldi or Matt Smith, being included in the 60th anniversary special, which to me also speaks to what I think is happening with Doctor Who, and it is this kind of soft reboot. It is going back to these two so they can sort of be like, hey, remember series 4? Okay, well, you can sort of, if you want to, completely block out everything that happened after David Tennant regenerated and just sort of pick up with David Tennant again before he regenerates into the next Doctor. Because that's sort of how this feels. This gimmick of the Doctor being able to kind of revisit old faces and things like that is sort of telling. It's a cheap way of being able to reuse old faces in other media, I suppose, like comic books, etc., if they really want to. But it's also like, this is also an excuse for, in 10 years time, if you want to bring back Matt Smith, you can now do silly things like that, or the Doctor can regenerate into, Matt Smith's Doctor for 1 or 2 episodes again for another series of specials, and then give it to another guy or gal. And another really clear sign that Doctor Who has been in trouble, and why they brought back these two people as massive damage control, is if you look at, this is the trailer on YouTube for the last series of Jodie Whittaker, called the Flux. It was meant to be this big massive kind of series arc, and so the views, right? There's 758,000 views, and that's a lot of views, right? You think okay, and that's from a year ago. Then you look at the trailer for The Power of the Doctor, which is her final episode from 11 months ago. And then it's like, okay, so there's 566,000. That's still a lot. Still a lot of people watch that trailer. Okay. And then you get to this trailer that is 4 days old and has 1.5 million views. 1.5 million views. That right there is the most clear sign of what is going on with Doctor Who right now, why they've done this. But also, I don't know if I like it. I kind of don't like it, in a way, because what this is telling me is that the BBC have now lost all faith in this show, right? So yes, Tennant into Smith was great, catapulted. Smith into Capaldi was remained steady, and then Capaldi into Whittaker took a dive. It took a dive, even with Peter Capaldi. I love him. He's one of my favorite Doctors, but he was not dealt a good deal with the scripts that he was given and whatnot. And then it's like, yeah, they're desperate, and I'm like, okay, you've lost all faith in your show to the point to where, like, you just have to go back to member berries to try and rescue it. And this feels like Star Wars. This feels like Star Trek. This feels like we have to do the things, otherwise people aren't going to come back. So instead of just being bold, casting someone who's right for the Doctor, hiring a showrunner who's right for it, it's like, no, we got to go back to Russell T Davies because he made it work before, so he'll make it work again. We got to go back to David Tennant because everybody loves that, and we got to go back to, and I'm just bored. Like, I've not even seen this, and I've seen the trailer obviously, but like, I'm not even seeing these 3 specials with David Tennant, and I already feel bored. I'm like, I don't care. This is the 60th anniversary. I should be excited, but the 60th should be so much more than just David Tennant's Doctor. And maybe there will be. Maybe there is. Maybe there's stuff they haven't announced yet. Maybe Matt Smith is back. Maybe Peter Capaldi is back. Maybe. But we'll see. I kind of feel like I doubt it, but I'll happily be proven wrong. But the fact that they're not even kicking off this 50th anniversary special with bringing in the new Doctor, they're waiting for the anniversary specials to be over to then bring in the new Doctor, is really fucking weird. It's really weird to me. This is why I'm calling this a soft reboot, and it's because what they want to do is they want to, I get the vibe that they want to sort of forget what happened these last, however many seasons, 5 to however many seasons there have been now. I think Peter Capaldi's was season 10, his final season. And then there were like 3 more seasons, like 13, 14 seasons. So like, yeah, they just sort of want to erase almost 10 whole seasons of the show and just give viewers these kind of jumping off points with these 2 characters. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure it's going to be that good. I'm not sure it's going to be that interesting. I'm interested to see it, and I will watch the specials, and I'll definitely do some reviews on them. But yeah, let's go to the chat, because that's all I really wanted to say about things. Phil says, man, remember in the early mid 2010s, Tumblr was massive. Everyone on there had a weird England slash UK fascination. Doctor Who was top of the world. It was. Doctor Who was top of the world. Sherlock was top of the world, and Stephen Moffat was running both shows. And you know, and his friend Mark Gatiss was also doing a bunch of writing on Doctor Who, and he was co-creator of Sherlock. Yeah, I mean the 2010s were huge for that stuff. That was sort of where you know, everything began to become more interconnected. These shows were streaming over, not streaming, but they were on BBC America and all that kind of stuff, or PBS, and they were able to become massive global hits, which was great. Um, I was really happy to see Doctor Who skyrocket like that, because why not? Karen Gillan, who plays Nebula and stuff like that, like she's hardly any Doctor Who star goes off to be in a bunch of Hollywood movies. So that's kind of it's a very different, or was a very different landscape. I'm not sure. I don't know now if any of the people in Doctor Who would ever be worthy of being in big Hollywood movies. I have no idea. I don't get the vibe that they are. So I guess the big question of the night is culture in crisis? And in some ways, yeah, yes, a little bit. There is this sort of, desperate, pathetic need to constantly revisit the past and not move forward. You look at, again, you look at Star Wars, you look at Star Trek, you look at Doctor Who, you look at some of these major big properties, you look at the last Matrix movie, everything is so geared towards, you have to remember the past, you have to go back to the past, you can't just move things forward. And Phil says, I think it's all corporate's fault, and in most ways, absolutely. And the thing is, you can revisit the past but still move things forward, and there's great examples of this. Top Gun Maverick is one. That to me is that was a brilliant movie. That was a brilliant way of doing a legacy sequel. Blade Runner 2049, again, another perfect example of revisiting a very old franchise that hasn't been beaten to death, like a dead, it's not been, beating a dead horse. That was another good example of how you can do that. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, that was awful. The Flash being acting like this is Batman 3, like, fuck off. It's not. Things like that. It's like, those are just these stupid member berries that they're trying to get people to come back to that well. And it shows just a gross misunderstanding of some of these franchises and some of these characters. And I should have talked about it tonight, 'cause it would have been good. I think Tim Burton recently was just like, oh, it's ridiculous. He's not happy with what, with this resurgence of Michael Keaton's Batman and his Superman and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of get it. I would be annoyed. I'd be annoyed with that as well. So I do think there is a bit of a crisis, and I think this crisis goes beyond just filmmaking and TV shows. I mean, as an author, as a writer, I see it all the time in the book industry. I mean, so many things you see coming out are just the same type of thing. Nothing, especially in the UK, like there are so few risk takers in the publishing industry. Everything has to be so boring and so safe and so twee and so middle class, that it gets really boring. And there's also this, in addition to this, there's also this weird fear of criticism. Because you don't want to upset the corporate overlords, because you want to make sure that they like you and that they want to publish you and they want to hire you and all that kind of stuff, which I get. You don't want to be sitting there trashing the hand that feeds you and all that kind of stuff. But at some point, you need to look in the mirror and realize that, I don't know, have some self-respect. I've had some conversations recently that were private conversations that essentially people don't want to say certain things on when a conversation goes a certain way publicly, will then privately be like, I can't, no, I gotta stop, I can't do this because I don't upset X, Y, or Z. And I'm just like, man, really? We're that worried, that what, our own careers are going to be kneecapped because we're going to say this very boring, bland book is a boring and bland book by a boring, bland author who really has no right being as popular as they are. Like, really? We just got to go with it, huh? Okay, that seems a bit stupid. I don't know, but I do feel there is a real a real sense of fear when it comes to criticism and criticizing our pop culture. And so yes, I do think that there is a crisis, and everyone is so on edge because they don't want to upset people, and I'm just kind of like, you know what, fuck it, I don't give a shit. If I say something that pisses you off, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna like go after someone, but it's like, if something is dumb or something is bad, you should be able to call it out without fear of oh my god, I might not be able to get a job because I've said this wasn't a very good episode of something, or oh, this book isn't a very good book, or oh, I've questioned this publisher for publishing X, Y, and Z. Like, you should be able to do that because, like, gee whiz, come on. Phil in the chat says, get excited for next Marvel. Yes, pretty much. So that's about it, guys and gals. That's about it. Any questions? Any last minute questions? Any last minute thoughts? Well, yeah, I mean, there is, Phil in the chat says, don't hurt the artist's fifis, and yeah, there is a bit of that where you don't want to hurt the precious big name celebrity, who is behind something. But there's also, it's also the like I said, the corporate overlords. It's you don't want to upset the publisher. You don't want to upset the agent. You don't want to upset the producer. You don't want to upset the, whatever, the Kevin Feige. You don't want to upset those people by saying things like She-Hulk was shit. Just flat out admitting it. Everyone has been so. I mean, we've seen it for years with Rotten Tomatoes, and there was that article recently that came out about how a PR company were paying people for positive reviews. It's like, yeah, no shit, people have been getting paid for positive opinions on that awful website that has had no meetings since about 2014. Yeah, I don't know. Phil says, it's so funny. It's an if you're not with me, you're an enemy thing. It's true, and it's frustrating and difficult to maneuver because you pull people to a side, and you have blunt conversations, and there's the total agreement going on, but the public face has to be all like, oh, we're all so happy and we love everything and everything's so great, when it's actually, no, actually, why don't we just start calling shit for shit, and make people do better art, make these companies produce better films, make them produce better TV shows, make publishers produce better books, instead of just put on this fucking fakeness and just because you want to get your free access to shit. Like, fuck off with that bullcrap. Come on, man. Come on, have a backbone. But that's my rant. That's my hour and 13 rant. I'll probably wrap it up here because why have a super long show? I'm back next week, I think. And if all goes to plan, I have a returning guest, very probably. Yep. Okay, so next week, let me just double check, and I'll give you the info. Okay, what's today's date? Today's at, yeah. So next week is the 4th. Phil in the chat says, bring me up for Blade 2. We can definitely do Blade 2, and we can definitely talk about it at some point. maybe, yeah, we'll talk about that off later. But yeah, so next week I'm bringing back Lena and the Lions. They have a new album coming out. Topic will be announced later, but they're gonna be coming back and hanging out with me for an hour to chat, you know, music and what they've been up to and new album and all that kind of stuff, which I'm looking forward to. So yeah, be back next week 7:30 p.m. GMT, and to hang out with us. You can go back and find the old episode with me and Lena and Lions, as we talked about their top 6 favorite movies, which were was a hell of a lot of fun. But anyway, until next week, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you when I see you.